Good morning, everyone. I had a whole speech planned, and I feel like Steve has so eloquently stolen my thunder on that. So the whole point I was going to start off with is we last met almost a year ago. Just a few weeks after that, we had the events that shocked the nation with the coroner's ruling on the Awab Ishaq coroner's ruling, and that was unforgivable. We should never have had that. We need to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And this session was titled, Do We Have a Crisis? And actually, I don't think we're talking about the crisis, but this session is more about how we deal with this crisis. I think no one is probably doing as more as some of the first two speakers we got, especially with regards to dealing with that, with the crisis. So, Alan Park has agreed to come back and join us again this year, and I think he's had a very, very busy year, and I'm hoping he's going to give some insight into what he's been doing, and he's going to be talking about his knowledge and information management, the silver bullet. And so could we please welcome Alan to the stage.
Good morning. My name is Alan Park. I am the Compliance and Systemic Investigation Manager for the Housing Ombudsman, and for the eagle-eyed amongst you, yes, I forgot to pack my shoes for this conference. A bit about the Housing Ombudsman. For those that don't know, we investigate complaints from residents of social landlords. That can be local authorities, it can be housing associations, and many of those complaints are about property condition and disrepair. And last year I came here to talk about our focus report on damp and mould, and as we've said, just a few weeks later, a lot of the warnings in that report were seen and evidenced by what happened in Rochdale. So you might be sat there thinking, why on earth then am I not going to talk about damp and mould again? But one of the things that my team looks to do when carrying out systemic investigations in our work is actually look at the learning from that work and how we can support the sector to improve. And so what I want to do is widen the conversation, not about what's gone wrong, but about how we can go about trying to fix it. Because a lot of the people we speak to do think that the problem can't be fixed, that there are too many properties, too many problems, too little money. And what we did this year is we started to look at the root cause. Why are properties getting into such poor condition? Why is it so hard to fix them? And so what I want to do is to try and come up with, solutions. But in order to come up with the solution, you need to know what the problem is. You need to know what's been attempted before. Who else has tried to fix the problem and what have they done? What has succeeded and what has failed? You need knowledge and good information management of that knowledge to know what's been happening. In this year alone, we've carried out so far 5 special investigations into social landlords, with a 6th on the way into Islington Council in the next couple of weeks. Now, when we look at special investigation, we don't just look for what's gone wrong, we look for the root cause of what's gone wrong. And as you can see from the slide, in every single special investigation we've carried out this year, what has gone wrong with disrepair has been rooted in poor knowledge and information management. In every single instance with these landlords, we found that the landlords and the contractors working on their behalf had very little sight of what problem they were trying to fix and why it was happening. When someone had visited the property, who had visited the property. In a lot of instances, the resident knew more about what was going wrong than the 5th or 6th contractor to visit to try and put it right. We saw evidence of poor repair records, poor communication, multiple recording systems, missed appointments, ineffective appointments where someone rocks up without the right tools, without the right equipment, or without the right expertise to eventually fix the problem. And at the end of it is a resident who is exacerbated by having had the same conversation with about 5 different people. The resident knew more about their property, knew more about what needed fixed, but landlords and their contractors had poor records of what had been going on. There was no joined-up approach, with different solutions being proposed by different contractors. Ultimately, nobody knew what was going on. So we saw this as the underlying reason, both behind damp and mould, but also just disrepair and general service failure in the sector. We saw it as a repeated theme in the spotlight reports we'd issued about damp and mould, but also about noise, repeated themes in the special investigations as I've gone on. And we saw that there was a poor data culture around how knowledge is created, stored, used, and shared across the sector. Now, the housing sector often refers to record keeping, but record keeping is only one aspect of it. But actually, it's about who has access to that data, who needs that data, what that data is, having a whole methodology and culture around what's needed. Many social landlords will know that one of the bits of legislation coming is the access to information scheme, where landlords' requirements for data management will be put on the same footing as public sector bodies with freedom of information. So this requirement is there in everything that we were looking at. So we looked at a dedicated spotlight report, which you can look at on our website, about knowledge and information management, or KIM as it's come to be referred to. And the title of the spotlight report is it the silver bullet? Because in everything we saw that the problem could have been fixed or made easier had people had good knowledge and information management. So as part of that report, we looked at our caseload across the year. We carried out a call for evidence across the sector. We spoke to local authorities, housing associations. We took evidence responses from residents. We partnered with the London School of Economics to look at how local authorities were readying themselves for the Access to Information scheme. We talked to the regulator. We talked to the Information Commissioner's office. We talked to resident panels, landlords. We gathered information from across the sector. Our casework showed us that in 191 cases, where we found that landlords had said that the problem they had in resolving the issue had been directly linked to poor knowledge and information management. We saw that the complaints, in 38 complaints, they'd been directly related to knowledge and information management. They'd had an uphold rate of 51%. Where it had been a key issue in 153 of those complaints, the maladministration rate had gone up to 66%. The complaint handlers that we spoke to said that their ability to fix disrepair issues at the complaint stage was severely hampered by not having access to what had been done, who had done it, the right information and management. And this went on into our own work as well. When we were contacting social landlords, we saw that we were chasing paperwork a lot of the time. Landlords were delayed in responding to us. They were taking too much time. We were having to issue CHFOs, that's a complaint handling failure order. Landlords were asking for reviews of cases because they suddenly found information that we'd been asking for months that changed our outlook on the complaint. So we saw, what this shows is we saw an entire kind of evidence base across the sector that there was just real lack of information and a real lack of knowledge about what's happening. And what that leads us to conclude is, what is the impact of that on the resident? How can you possibly go about fixing the problem if you don't know what the problem is? In 88% of cases that we looked at, it was directly related to repairs. It was impacting timescales. It was impacting the ability to do the job. We saw in over half of the cases and people that we spoke to that there was an issue with databases, where many landlords were using more than one system to track repair records, to track logs, and to ultimately know what they needed to do. And then within that, different staff had access to different levels of database and different levels of information. So depending on who you got on the phone at the end of the day, what they could tell you and the information they could give you was very much dependent on what they had access to on the day. So what did we find? We found that, like most things, the solution comes from the top. that successful knowledge and information management starts with an understanding and appreciation of its benefits for landlords and residents from senior leadership. We need social landlords, contractors, everybody working on behalf of landlords to understand the value of, yes, good record keeping, but good data management and good access to that data management, good knowledge and information management that empowers things like quality assurance processes, both internally and with third-party contractors. We found a real lack of understanding at a senior level of what good knowledge and information management is. And we found a culture that simply accepts poor practice and that records won't be available. And almost a fatalism around, well, it'll take more than one appointment to fix that, when actually it just saves time and money if you have all the resources at your availability to fix it on the first visit. We found landlords and contractors were professionally vulnerable to the practices of poor knowledge and information management, not able to say what they'd done and when they'd done it when we came asking, leading to poor complaint handling. We found that knowledge and information management was draining on resources, poor knowledge and information management, not only repeat visits, but by the time something had resulted in a complaint about disrepair, about damp and mold, the person dealing with the complaint doesn't have access to what they're talking to. And this vicious circle of the complaint handler saying, well, we'll send somebody out to take a look after somebody's already been out to take a look. The call for evidence showed that there was a lack of strategy around what's coming, around the access to information scheme and around the requirements on social landlords, and that no one was really focusing on what needed to happen. One of the things that we think needs to happen is key recording standards across the sector. And you might be sat there thinking, well, I'm not a social landlord, that's for the social landlord to sort out. But if you're acting on behalf of a landlord, if you're visiting on behalf of a landlord, if you're working on behalf of a landlord, within whatever you're developing, you should be looking to develop those key recording standards. How are you going to track what you've done and when you've done it? You should be making clear who created it and when. The records should be created as soon as possible after the event. If you're visiting a property, we have seen landlords start to develop live recording, whether that's through cameras or for photographs that are immediately uploaded to a database back at a central headquarters where someone then can look at it and make a judgment, or if the resident rings up, they've got that information available to them straight away. Information needs to be clear, specific, and unambiguous. It has to have all the relevant information and so that there is a clear record of the decision making, so that when the Housing Ombudsman comes and asks, why did you do that? You can say, well, this is why we did it, and here are the records. Information should always be kept updated. If an action was taken, who did it? When did they do it? Why did they do it? And what is going to happen in the future? We saw that systems were a major problem in that there was too much reliance on the system and not the people who were inputting into the system. Any data management system is only as good as the people putting the information and the quality of information put into it. We saw a lack of process and a lack of planning around what information is needed, a lack of awareness from staff of what information is needed and when it's needed. When in your work, you might specialize in a particular area. You know what information is important, but does somebody at the landlord know that that information is important? Have you conveyed in your discussions with the landlord, we really need to know this, or we really need to record that? We found information being lost when landlords merged or when they were dealing with third parties. As I said, different systems, different ways of recording things. We saw staff not being able to access systems when they moved from one landlord to the other. And the main finding, as I've already said, was around disrepair and the way that knowledge and information management poor knowledge and information management is hampering the ability to tackle disrepair and the ability to tackle the damp and mold issue. And without good knowledge and information management, there is very little hope of being able to adequately address damp and mold issues. In 2/3 of cases that the Ombudsman upheld, They were as a result of poor records and information management. And that was the reason that it had gone wrong. That was the reason it had got to the kind of levels we see in the newspapers and we see on social media and we see in our casework, because they hadn't resolved it as early as possible in the first visit because they didn't know the problem that they were dealing with. The majority of complaint handlers who responded to our call for evidence said that they could not address complaints adequately due to poor knowledge and information. If there is one area of service provision to focus on driving a data culture of good knowledge and information management, it is around disrepair and property condition. We made several recommendations from our report, most of which were around governance and culture, as I've said. Organisations need to define what good knowledge and information management is. As you talk to social landlords and organisations about working with them, do you know what your good knowledge and information management looks like? Have you created clear definitions of the data required? Do you have an information asset register? Do you know what outcomes you're working towards and what knowledge and information and data they require? Do you have a strategy? And you know, and your staff know, and your contractors know what the expected standards of them and how that will be monitored and quality assured? Are you benchmarking against other organisations? Are you training your staff to ensure that they understand the value of good record keeping, good knowledge and information management? Those key recording standards we talked about. We've looked at reviewing existing databases to ensure that what's already there is robust enough and that landlords are able to act on them. We looked at structural changes around mergers so that when contracting a third party or merging with another organisation, stress testing the current knowledge and information management procedures, carrying out risk assessments around knowledge and information management, due diligence to ensure that everybody knows what's important and everybody has it at their fingertips when they need it. And we set out clear recommendations around the approach to repairs. Missed appointments are a complete waste of absolutely everybody's time. The report that we're about to issue into Islington Council makes that very, very clear, that ineffective appointments are a waste of time and they're a waste of money, and they are rooted in poor knowledge and information management. Have you carried out an analysis of why that happens? Why are appointments missed? Why is the resident not there? Why does the contractor turn up at the wrong time? Are you issuing things like reminders? So, as I say, it may have seemed a bit odd that I was going to talk about knowledge and information management, but hopefully I've shown you that actually when we're trying to establish what the root cause of these issues are, when we're trying to address these things as efficiently and quickly as possible, when we're trying to carry out the recommendations of our damp and mould report to know your stock, know how it needs to be fixed, know what you need to do, that is rooted in the very dry subject of really good record keeping, really good knowledge and information management. It is a way to reduce wastage, reduce costs, and ultimately give yourselves the best opportunity of solving the problems before the sector. Thank you very much.